so famines were no longer occurring, right? People had enough to eat, also clean water, electricity, that kind of thing. There were investments in that. Okay, so that's one of them. Now that's one means of institutional change, and if you've got 1 billion people, you can let 200 million just sink or swim and something will happen. Institutional change too is as I've termed it, invite your friends. Right? Now this is really the story of India's growth. Now India grew for very different reasons and in a very different way. So India was also dirt poor, and India's economic growth really only started in the 1990s, so 10 years after that of China, and it started in a different way. Essentially, you should think of almost socialist governments throughout India, incredibly corrupt governments. I mean, incredibly corrupt governments. You should have a look at the studies which looked at the people who were in parliaments. Often they were either convicted of murder or accused of murder. So you should think of a lot of Indian politics as basically being made up by actual mafia bosses. And so we're talking extremely dysfunctional politics in India, right? At the local level, the provincial level, the city level, exceptionally corrupt and dysfunctional government. How does a country like that grow? Well, it grows, first of all, from a point of almost zero, right? You are talking about what is known as the sort of Malthusian trap, right? As it were. Quite a few of the babies born then will have died of hunger, right? And even now you have slums whereby, yeah, there's a good chance that those born there will not make it just for lack of food, for lack of income that the parents may have. So incredibly, incredibly poor and incredibly corrupt, which means that if anybody makes any visible money, there's a good chance that some gang of politics will come by and rob you of it. How do you grow then? How do you build something, right? If you just build a factory in that period, then if you're not very well politically protected, there's every chance that it'll be robbed blind. So you don't just invest. Well, India had one thing that turned out to be worth something. And it wasn't worth something 20 years before, but it was worth something in the 90s. Can you guess what India had that was worth something and that you can make a buck with without good water, without running electricity, without a good transportation sector, without well-functioning import and export structures? I mean, something that you could run in a back office semi-illegally and you could quickly move places if you had to. Guess what India had that turned out to be worth something?
Gold?
Nope.
Rubbish?
Nope.
Like the people doing phone lines and shit?
Phone lines. And what was it that they could do that others couldn't? Others in other countries?
Well, I mean, labour is cheap.
Yes.
And they're good at learning English language.
English. That's it. English. They could speak English. So they had an upper middle class who could speak English. Because, you know, that's it's not the main first language in India, but it is the language that they all learn. And particularly the middle class has learned English, right? They were sort of quoting Shakespeare to each other. And again, you're talking about, you know, upper middle class girls finding out that indeed in these call centers, they could make a fortune, relatively speaking, right? And so all you needed to run a call center, I don't know if you know what a call center is, okay? A call center is, you know, where they do back office things, you know, repairs, or you have questions for IBM or whatever it is, right? You then call someone and you're actually then connected to somebody, let's say in Hyderabad or in Bombay, right? And all you need for that is, well, you sort of need a satellite dish for the phone. You need a power generator, which you can run on fuel, right? And you need a couple of people with phones who can speak English. And then you need a script, okay, learn this so that you can speak this to the clients. Well, that's not so hard to set up. And if you find local corrupt politicians, you quickly move to another neighborhood, right? And so who sets up these call centers? Well, of course, the corrupt politicians. They set that up because they can protect it in their own little neighborhood, right? So you need very little from the rest of the city. You don't need ongoing electricity. You don't need a running transport system. You need hardly anything for these coal centers. And labor was such dirt cheap, but nevertheless they had good English, that, you know, this was a booming thing, right? So coal centers boomed in the early 90s. And well, then even if you're a very corrupt politician, right, you're absolutely the scum of the earth, even then think of your incentives as an Indian politician, which is you can run a coal center and your main opponent, your main enemy, who's just like you, who's in the neighborhood next door, is also doing this. Now you can get an advantage if you can get the electricity to work better. If you can make sure your workers can get to the call centers better without being harassed, right? And if they're slightly better fed at schools, and if the schools in your neighborhood are slightly better at the English, then you can become more powerful and take over the territory of the other politician. Or he will do that to you. So suddenly, no matter what sort of, you know, bad person you were previously, suddenly your economic incentives are to start to be nice, are to start to set up electricity lines, get running water going, get transport going, get a minimum social safety net going, right? Working police rather than corrupt police. So you found that purely for competitive reasons, all these scheming politicians from all kinds of different castes and religions, this and that, particularly in these areas where you had these call centers, started to be, as it were, pro-social, started to be pro-growth and pro-growing institutions. So that's how India started to grow. From some of the major cities, which were sort of more pro-business, like Bombay, Hyderabad were well known for these kind of things, this spread. And this also spread across the country. So one of the places which was the last to do this would be Kolkata, you know, the other side of the country, where they were still sort of in a communist fantasy and it was incredibly corrupt and poor. But there too, the politicians were thinking, well, politicians are going to come from outside and they're going to come with their businesses because they're 10 times richer than us. Either we start to grow or we're going to get taken over and maybe killed, right? Because that's the consequence if you really lose in politics. So out of purely selfish reasons, all these sort of mafiosi politicians started to be pro-growth and started to, as it were, set up minimum structures. And India is, even right now, still going through that boom phase whereby politics, purely out of local competitive reasons, is becoming better and better and better and better and better. And not because they've morally seen the light, no, but because they're afraid of the competition down the road, right? And they should be afraid of the competition down the road. So that's roughly speaking how they did it. And then, okay, if you then think of the central government in New Delhi, well, of course, what do you think they started to say once this growth happened? Two things. They first of all started to say it's because of us, which really had nothing to do with them, but that's normal, right? Everybody owns a winner, right? And so they're all pretending this was due to their brilliant policies. And if you read the economic textbooks that the Indians are writing of that time, it's fanciful, it's you know, Fugazi, right? It's kind of kabuki theater. It's as if this was a brilliant planning move by New Delhi, as if this was a two-sector endogenous growth model. I mean, it's amazing how they write about that period. Although the consultancies do write openly about, oh, no, it's the story I sketched. They were selling their English language ability, which was basically kind of a snob factor, right? But they started to do something else, which is they started to set up more modern economic structures for the country as a whole, you know, getting banking organized, stock exchanges more organized, and basically allowing the rest of the country to grow as well, although there are lots of stories to tell about India.
Historically, I have a question why India's government is so corrupt to begin with. Like, it started somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you take your mind back to India in 1800, relatively speaking, India was a quite wealthy place, right? It had just been invaded by several, as it were, colonial empires out of Europe. There was Portugal, the Netherlands was in there, England was in there, I think here even Denmark was in there somewhere, right? But England was starting to become dominant as the colonial power in 1800, but it was still relatively wealthy. Lots of princes, lots of raj, and quite divided. And then basically the English almost smashed the industrial base of India in the 19th century, which led to huge problems, huge famines and all kinds of other problems in India, because they wanted India to absorb the industrial production of England itself, basically, right? And so that was a huge downturn. And then, okay, in sort of 48 or something, Britain finally gave independence to India. And they did that on the basis of having copied the Whitehall system, which I talked to you about previously, of government in India. And so there was a cadre of reasonably well-trained Indian civil servants who were more than happy to take over, and they had this notion of, nationalism and going forward. But they had a very socialist notion of government, so very much a top-down, we will tell you what to do, right? And that didn't work so well. So one problem was that they sort of made a very similar mistake as the communists, which is that they thought they could actually plan things, right, at the center. But a deeper problem was that they never had that much power either. So India is an exceptionally divided country, and the Brits in their, well, as you know what the Brits are like with their colonies, they like to divide and rule, and so they actually accentuated a lot of the divisions because it allowed them to hang on to power more. And so when the division came, they were exceptionally divided across the country in all kinds of ways. So there are many different religions, many forms of Hinduism, but also up and down the country, there's Sikhs, Muslims, various types of Hinduism are in the country, and those differences were accentuated, and different people are in charge of different things. And also they have something called the caste system, right? Now the caste system, you should see them as horizontal unions, meaning that these are people with the same profession. So you have, a caste of bicycle taxis, you have a caste of writers, you have a caste of warriors, you have castes of butchers, all kinds of castes you have in India. And the thing is that there's no caste anywhere which is in the majority anywhere, because, well, you don't have a majority of your population being taxi drivers with bicycles anywhere. You've got them everywhere, but they're not the majority everywhere. And so it's highly divided. You've got these castes everywhere, but in different places, particular castes have found themselves in power, right? And then they hang on to that tenaciously, right? And little groups are in power. But basically, the vast majority of your local population is never quite you, right? Either they have a different religion or they have a different caste. And so whatever clique is in power somewhere, they're sort of extracting rents, as the economists would say. You may say parasitism. They find themselves in charge, but they don't really represent the majority of the population because they can't. The majority is always a different caste. The majority is often a different religion, right? Or a very different political ideology. So, they're communist or socialist or liberal or something else, right? And so that's what you had, right? Whomever was in charge was basically never feeling themselves to be representing the majority of the population. And even now in India, we speak of political parties as national parties. But if you look at the actual election results in India, in every province or so, they're called something else. So national parties are really just coalitions of lots of local political parties. And local political parties are often headed by someone who's famous, or, a cricketer, or somebody known from Bollywood. And they're like a figurehead. And underneath that are sort of, powerful families and industrial interests. But that's roughly why, right? Huge division.
Diversity is way too wide.
Too much, exactly. Too much, if you like, right? And hence not a local majority. It's not diversity as in Europe, whereby you had, local majorities and them being nationalist, because at least internally they're honest then, right? You represent your local population, and it's none of that, right? It's a different feel to it.
How do they get to be in power if they aren't the majority? Like, how did that...
You got to vote for someone. You got to vote for someone. So whatever your mechanism is, whether it's via the gun or via the booth, someone gets to be in power there.
So it's bullying, basically.
Not just that, there is just no majority to vote for. There is no sense of we are all X in any particular province.
10,000 groups, one of them's going to win.
Exactly.
That is so weird.
I mean, they've had this caste system for like
Long time.
5,000 years almost.
Well, yeah. Well, for 1,500 years, it's been very strong, as it were, right? I mean, they've had it for longer, but it really became very dominant about
I
1,500
just don't
years
see
ago.
how a low caste would be in charge. Like,
There wouldn't be. But as soon as a caste is in charge, you know, you can surreptitiously change the hierarchy of the castes, right? You can call your caste something else, and you can sort of say, oh, we've always been on top. So you can rewrite history, right? So the caste system seems to be very rigid, but there's always, as it were, a way out. If you do find yourself to be more powerful, you can rename yourself. You can rewrite the history books that are local, right? So there's always a way.
Conquered a whole bunch of times and never conquered anybody else. So the highest caste tends to be whoever conquered the most.
Exactly. Yeah. So India is also, in that sense, it makes a population that's very easy to subdue because they're used to somebody at the top, and it's almost doesn't matter who the top is. Could be Moguls, could be Brits, could be Danes, whoever. And you know, now it'll be Westerners, or they're becoming more prideful at the moment, right? And so.
Yeah, but do they have a chance politically at all?
Yes, no, I think in the long run, I think India's potential is enormous, much higher than China's actually. I think India, precisely because of this diversity, it's a huge protective force against a true monopolization of power.